Welcome back to the Reese Colbert Show here on Sirius XM Urban View. All right, y'all, it's time to pause for the cause because I have a special guest here with me today. She is my girl. I adore her. And not only that, she is one of my favorite things to say, New York Times bestseller. She joins us here today to talk about what we're going to make her second New York Times bestseller, her new book,
No worries.
Erased: What American Patriarchy Has Hidden from Us. The one and only New York Times bestseller, Malaika is here with us today. Welcome to the show, girl.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here, especially on such a pivotal week with your book release. You kind of been there, done that, got a t-shirt because you have a New York Times bestseller with your first book, Three Mothers. But just talk a little bit about the experience of doing it all over again. Is it just as difficult? Is it fun? Like, what are you feeling right now?
It is just as difficult. It's so much fun. It's all the feelings. I would say I'm
Yeah,
excited. I'm stressed. I can't wait for it to be out. And also, I'm nervous, but not
yeah,
people to read it. I know it's a good book. I feel very proud of the book. I'm nervous that people won't read it at a time where, people really need to. And so you just feel this drive to get it in front of as many people as possible. So I
yeah.
appreciate you helping me do that. And it's just so necessary in this moment. And I'll say, in terms of it being my second book, with Three Mothers, it was my debut. And so I think a lot of people, there was like no expectations really.
Right. Yeah.
When it did well, and I worked so hard for it to do well, now I feel like a lot of my friends are like, oh, it'll be another bestseller. But I'm like, not if you don't buy it.
Right.
And so
Hello,
I
books
think
don't sell
people
themselves.
assume, yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
you've already done well, that it's sort of just guaranteed. And so I actually think I'm coming up against the challenge of making sure people know, no, I still really need you to support me and buy this book, because if it's not my, friends and family first, and it's not the people who listen to this interview first, we won't get attention. And so
Right.
all the other
Right.
people will come after you all. So that's been my big thing,
Exactly.
is just making sure people know I still really need your support.
Absolutely. So we're going to support this book. So let's tell people what the book is.
Yeah.
Explain what Erased: What American Patriarchy Has Hidden from Us actually is going to talk about.
Yes, I say it's the go-to book for understanding how our nation is patriarchal. Who wrote that? It's our founding fathers into the Constitution. They maintained that, and we're still seeing it play out to this day. I
Mm-hmm.
wrote this book so that American patriarchy stops surprising all of us. It stops catching us off guard. So
Right.
we can actually do something about it. And some of those surprises are President Trump being reelected. And
Mm-hmm.
say that a lot of Black women were not surprised, but I think everybody else felt very kind of shocked by this. I think Roe v. Wade being overturned is another recent example of American patriarchy doing what it does best,
Yeah.
but people feeling very surprised by that. So it's just the time to really make sure we understand what we're up against. And I can break down that theory a little bit more as we get more into the interview, but
Yeah.
it's the go-to book for understanding American patriarchy.
And so it's understanding the system, right? And the way that it's ingrained. I want to make that distinction because I wonder if people might hear patriarchy and associate that with saying that this is some sort of indictment on masculinity
I
or
know.
on fatherhood or on things like that. Can you just explain for people who are immediately intimidated or thinking that this is going to be some sort of like gender war type of book when we know that that's definitely not the case?
Right, exactly. Yes. So patriarchy, the definition of it is that it's a system where men are supposed to have control over
Mm-hmm.
women, where men are supposed to have power, and that women are solely meant to reproduce that power. That is like the definition of patriarchy.
Yeah.
And of course, we can see why that would be problematic. But in American patriarchy, the reason I'm really distinguishing American is that every country that is a patriarchal system is going to operate differently based off
Mm-hmm.
of how they're defining what it means to be man and what it means to be woman, in that particular system. And so in the US, our history of this has been that the founding fathers, who were white men who were rich, and who wanted to kind of maintain their power over everyone else, decided to systematize their belief that they should be in power. And so the
Mm-hmm.
way you systematize something is you put it into law. But the way that they kept that power was to exclude many of us from the definitions of man and woman. And
Right.
so, particularly for Black people in the US, we were never included in those definitions. And so we've sadly seen that we try to sometimes assimilate to those definitions and we try to replicate those power systems and those hierarchies of power, even though it has not served us to do so. So, really,
Mm-hmm.
this is not at all an attack on men by any means.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is, though, a discussion around why this kind of inequity was written into our laws, and why we're still seeing it hurt us to this day. And it's hurting everyone. It's not only hurting women. Everybody is hurt by these rigid definitions that were meant to create inequity at their root.
Yeah. That's true. I think we've seen that play out time and time again, and yet people are still buying into it.
Yeah.
So do you, talk about a little bit the fact that people are buying into it. And I will always acknowledge that there's programming, there's targeting and all kinds of things, but talk a little bit about why people are buying into it
Yeah.
despite the fact that it hasn't served everybody the way that it's intended to serve. It's intended to serve just a select group of people.
Yes, exactly. The way in which American patriarchy kind of presents itself, this definition of man is that men hold power and they control the people around them, and that they are supposed to have access to money, and that their votes are the ones that count. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and we saw that in the Constitution that women aren't even mentioned at all. And so women in these men's lives were supposed to just have kids and reproduce those legacies, but that everybody else was taken out of these categories. And one of the largest ways in which we've been dehumanized, people of color especially, is to be excluded from what it means to be man or woman. So we're kind of taught to fight for our right to be
Mm.
gendered in the
Mm-hmm.
States. And that we're sort of tricked into thinking if we can assimilate, if we can get as close as possible to these two identified groups, then maybe we will know what it is to be treated as human in the US.
Mm.
That's
Mm.
our path to humanity. Maybe that's our path to being able to have control in our own lives, or to have our power acknowledged. And so, so many people don't realize that they've kind of been tricked into
Yeah.
maintaining it, even if it's not serving them, even if it never included them and never fully will include them. We feel actually that our calling is to continue on that path and continue on that ladder. And if we can just get as close as possible to that, then we will feel okay and we will feel safe. And so I try to make it very clear in the book that is not the path.
Mm-hmm.
That the opposite of American patriarchy is not for women to have control over men. I think a lot of people are very fearful of that when you challenge patriarchy, that maybe you're saying women are going to control everything, and as men, I need to like now be very defensive and protect
Yeah. Yeah.
my place here. And no, the opposite is actually that each of us has power over
Mm.
ourselves, that we should have power over decisions around our own bodies. And that actually, when we're talking about American democracy, that has to do with power being vested in the people. Um,
Mm.
and American patriarchy has never been in alignment with American democracy, actually. So my book is envisioning what American democracy could look like if
Yeah.
power within each person was respected and acknowledged.
That's brilliant. I mean, we're seeing that lack of humanity, right? And the implications and the and what people are willing to give away
Yeah.
for power or for wealth or for protection.
Yeah.
In terms of we're seeing it with with what's happening with immigrants, we're seeing what's happening with trans people, and
Yes.
there have been all of these ways that people have said their humanity doesn't matter because it takes something away from me.
Yeah.
And that's very detrimental. So give the audience an idea of the time frame. I'm sure they could gather from what you're saying. It goes from the beginning to even contemporary time. So how is it? Give us a little bit idea of the composition of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to also speak to something you were saying around the dehumanizing of immigrant people, the dehumanizing of trans people. When we understand this kind of basic category of man and woman that we were sold, it makes a lot of sense why we are so critical, and especially in this time, President Trump attacks trans people so much because so many people feel comfort in
Mm-hmm.
binary because that's that access to humanity that I was talking about.
Yep.
So this notion that there's any identity that challenges that really rocks people's kind of worldview of, well, what does it mean to be human then? Because we've attached
Mm.
so much meaning to that. And so it's a very effective strategy of American patriarchy is to make us think that there is no other option available to us and no one else should have any opportunity to identify any differently. And so it also comes back to this root cause of American patriarchy. And remind me the question because then I took us into another direction.
No. That was perfect. I think that's so important to note because it's hurting us. It's really hurting us. And now it's clicking that it's that patriarchal, system that forces us into thinking that, well, we gain our humanity through this gender. That's mind blowing. That's so mind
Yeah,
blowing.
thank you. Thank you. Oh,
And
I remembered you were telling me about the timeline.
yeah, the timeline. Yeah. Because it's a history book and contemporary. There's a
Yeah.
lot to it. I know this audience in particular, they love to get some history. So
It's so important. I mean, when we see attacks on history constantly, there's a reason for that. Because if we don't understand the history, we can't understand how we've arrived where we are today. And so the book spans the founding fathers' vision. So I talk about the beginning of American patriarchy is how they wrote it into the Constitution. But it goes all the way up into envisioning our future. And the
mm,
way that I organize the book is through kind of walking through stages of my own life. And so
mm,
I first start with my mom in the first part of the book and her feminism and how it was influenced by her desire to become a lawyer, but she was told that the men in her life are the ones that become lawyers, that that's not something a girl should aspire to. And that was kind of her initial understanding of patriarchy in her own life.
yeah.
And then in the second part, I then take us into my life, but I'm always bringing in people from history and showing us that there were people who showed us there were other ways of living. There were ways to challenge this always. And we've always had access to those tools. So, for instance, in the chapter around my life, I talk about Anita Hill
Yeah.
and the way in which she so courageously stood up against Clarence Thomas, despite
Mm-hmm.
the fact that, of course, we know that he was still appointed into the Supreme Court. But the fact that she also inspired so many people. So when the trial happened in 1991, she inspired the Year of the Woman in 1992.
Right.
Year
Yep.
that I was born, this is 1992. So the whole book kind of goes in and out of I'm telling you about my life, I'm telling you about the personal stories because I want to bring everybody into that journey with me. Let's think about your own childhoods. Let's think about how your parents were taught this system, how they might have stood up against it. And I go into thinking about myself as a mom of three
Mm-hmm.
young, beautiful babies,
Yes.
5-year-old, 3-year-old, and my 1-year-old. But the world that they are coming into, I think
Mm.
technology, I think about how patriarchy is being written into our code and reproduced. And so, with that knowledge, when we've already walked through what it is throughout American history, and you can see how maybe it might just replicate itself unless
Mm-hmm.
you know and do something about it, I'm really thinking about our future as well. So, it spans
Yeah.
several years, but the way that I keep us grounded is by bringing it back to the personal so that hopefully the reader can do that as well.
Yeah, I think that's important because history is personal. So many people think of history as just some stale thing that's happened in a distant, far away time, but we're still living through history. We're seeing especially the MAGA Republicans, they're going back to history to
Yeah.
find blueprints. I mean, we're seeing abortion laws become applicable from the 1800s, so history
Yeah.
is not something that we can just park in the past. We have to understand the way that it impacts us.
Exactly. Yeah. And I kind of purposely throughout each chapter, I kind of jump back and forth. So I'm bringing in sometimes very historical context, sometimes very contemporary context, because that's what's happening throughout our lives. As we're living each day, we're coming up against forces that were, from centuries ago, or
Mm-hmm.
sometimes are playing out contemporarily. So it is always this dance. And so I wanted to reproduce that in the writing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, wonderful, just spectacular tools that you're giving us, because I don't know if people really have thought about it in this way.
I
Um,
really think so. I've
yeah.
been saying that on both sides. It's, on in the feminist text kind of world,
Mm-hmm.
not seen yet enough of that intersectional feminism. Like we're starting to see more of it. And
Yeah.
of course, I'm like on the shoulders of giants with Audre Lorde and Bell
Mm-hmm.
Hooks and really continuing that tradition. But I think that we haven't seen it in terms of the mainstream conversation around how you dismantle patriarchy. But then also
Yeah.
in books that are, again, on the shoulders of giants, these incredible books that talk about how racism is systematized and have made it
Mm-hmm.
obvious to us and have given us the books that we need to no longer have to explain from scratch what we're up against with
Mm-hmm.
Bill Wilkerson with caste and Ibram Kendi with Stamped from the Beginning and Clint Smith with How the Word Was Passed. Just incredible texts that have made it so clear that this is systematized.
Yeah.
It's not just a story, it's not just made up, and we're not imagining anything. We're just
Right.
written into the fabric of our nation. However, I do think that those books have missed this first part around what it means to be man or woman in the
Mm-hmm.
and how that's been used again, this fight for us to be gendered, and we like fight for that, and how it's playing with racism, and you cannot take those things apart. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that this text brings those conversations together in a way that we haven't really seen before. That's kind of my theoretical addition to the conversation.
Mm-hmm. It's important because I don't think that the gender conversation is going away anytime soon. We're seeing, it's almost being sane washed, some of this toxicity that we're seeing in terms of Trump and men and their views on power and who should hold them,
Yeah.
and even suggesting that, for instance, Democrats should be yielding to some of these patriarchal, really toxic notions. And there hasn't been enough talk about why that's not the way it goes. So this is definitely going to be part of that tool that we can use to push back on a lot of these just really appalling
I
ideas
agree.
that
And I
people.
think, yeah, similarly, what we've seen in terms of the most recent election and conversations of why are Latino men, like aligning themselves with Trump or yes, I think, obviously the majority of Black men did incredibly well. Um,
Yeah,
there
yeah.
were a few that we were like, what's going on with you? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so much of it comes back to this.
Yeah.
People don't get it. Like we feel that patriarchy is the path, and that's
Mm-hmm.
how we're going to regain the country and make the country great again, and how Trump wants to pay women to have children.
uh
It all comes back to this, and purposefully we've been told this is a confusing theory, or that patriarchy is sort of just this word, and what does it even mean? All of that is part of the strategy of
mm-hmm.
us from understanding that that's what we're facing on a day-to-day basis. And so
Yeah,
I want to
yeah.
demystify it.
Yeah, because the opposite of American patriarchy, like you said, is not American matriarchy. Nobody is asking for, who want to world girls and men are, subjugated. Just,
Right.
just we're really what we need to have is American humanity. If we
Yeah.
had some more humanity leading the way, we wouldn't be talking about a lot of the things that we're talking about right now, or the Republicans are putting forth in terms of cutting SNAP, cutting Medicare, cutting Medicaid. We have a woman who has been declared brain dead in Atlanta, who is
Mhm.
being kept alive because
Yeah.
her 9-week old fetus, it's past the heartbeat
Yeah.
period of really disgusting abortion restrictions in there. And so we're in a society where our humanity is getting stripped away from us right in front of our eyes. And this attraction that people have, thinking that the strong, so-called strong man and the patriarchy like Donald Trump is going to save us when they are actively plotting on our demise, is crazy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. We see so many endless current examples of this playing out. And as I was writing the book, I felt so frustrated at the same
Mm-hmm.
like I just need this book out there right now because you have to walk through it and understand what was built and why. And it really comes down to who gets to be defined as man and who gets to be defined as woman in the United States. And that already is a very flawed binary,
Mm-hmm.
and incorrect, but that is the foundation of the documents that our founding fathers wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And how you either include some people in that and how you exclude people from that.
Mm-hmm.
That is the balance. And
Yeah.
so every policy that came out of that, every law that came out of that is about maintaining that very basic and rigid premise.
Mm.
So we, even as we parent today, you
Mm-hmm.
come up. People don't even realize why they feel so passionately about if a son wants to paint his nails.
Yeah.
It's nothing like it's nothing beyond that. However, if we've been told and it's been ingrained in the fabric of our nation that to be human is to be one of these very specific categories,
Mm-hmm.
as a parent, you may become obsessed with it yourself and you start
Yeah.
to tell your kids how to fit into
Mm-hmm.
social order.
Mm-hmm.
But really, once you know that's just a story, it's all made up. And it was someone's opinion that became a system. We then feel very empowered to just make something else up, create something new, shift the laws. And I talk about the power of Black women and how we've so often done that throughout American history. By
Mm-hmm.
law, we were told that we were the complete opposite of this ladylike woman that needed protection, and that we, in our case, by law, we passed on the status of our children. No matter
Mm.
how a woman who was enslaved came to have a child, that child would be a slave.
Mm.
So we were told by American patriarchy that men were the ones that held power and men were the ones who passed their legacy and their status onto their children. So we knew that in American history. This is one particular example of Black women being pushed outside of that. And Black women saying, I don't care what the law says. I am a human,
Right.
human being. So
Mm.
I have to envision beyond what's being presented to me. I know
Mm.
that that is not truth, that that is not innate, that that is that's not what I need to follow. What I need to do is fight for this nation to see things the way that I do and rewrite these laws, create something else beyond what's being given to us. And so this book is entirely about everybody having that same mentality. You're coming up against something that was made up,
Yeah.
made into a law. We have the power to make something different. We have the power to use this democracy system to do better for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Because American patriarchy is actually not in alignment with American democracy. We've
Yeah.
not seen American democracy because democracy is power vested in the people, all
Mm-hmm.
of the people. And thus far, we haven't all been included in the definition of people. And so
Yeah.
I'm saying these need to be the categories where we think about what it means to be human. All
Mm.
of us should have access to that. All of us should have our votes count. All of us have, again, power within ourselves. And that's why those who maintain American patriarchy know how fragile it is and why they're working so hard and doubling down right now to make it seem like the only thing that's available to us and to erase evidence of anything different.
Mm. That is a whole lesson right there. Okay. So for my audience, they're always saying, well, what do we do now? What are we doing? What are we supposed to do? You got to give us some tools. This is one of those tools. Okay. And if you're listening and you still skeptical, you need to be the main one buying this book. Okay. Because it sounds like you got some deprogramming to do. So I
Yeah.
want you all to go out there and I want you to support this book. It is Erased: What American Patriarchy Has Hidden from Us by my good friend, New York Times bestseller, Malaika Tubbs. We got some reading to do. I got some reading to do. I got a beautiful package from Anna. It's so beautiful. I felt so honored that I got a nice little spread or whatever. So I'm gonna pick up some tea and I'm gonna sip some tea and read this book myself. And I'm gonna exercise these tools because I already feel like we're kindred sisters on this. You know, just last week on my show, I was talking about that a lot of people don't view women as humans, even though we have the gender designation. That gender designation is not offering us protection that protect women, and yet we saw, and this week will be another week of that, the way that women being violated is entertainment, it's sport, it's minimized, it's just content for people now. And so we got to get to a place of humanity. We all do. We really all do, because it's not serving people, and people who are dealing with the consequences of not treating people as human, it's not serving you. It might catch up to you one day. And then those of us who are dealing with the impacts of constantly having our humanity challenges, we're dealing with it. So let's all be better. Okay. And this is a way that we can all figure out how to deprogram some of this American patriarchal systemic programming that we have been fed that has not served us.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes, I completely agree. And like you said, everything that's playing out currently, we're seeing it in this current trial with P. Diddy. We have to start, it feels like we have to start from scratch every single time, right? We have to be like, no, this is how women have been treated historically. No, sexual assault and these horrific instances are a way that somebody asserts power. We know this from research around these perpetrators. But if there's not one place where all of it has been synthesized, it purposely makes it so that we have to use all of our energy just to explain what we're up against before we even get into the specifics of this example. And that's something that I wanted to take off our plate with this book. Give us the foundation. We don't have to explain it from scratch. Like if everyone read this book, they would go into those trials understanding, oh, okay, he is one of those people.
Yeah.
He was supposed to hold power over others, and he exerted that. She is not making this up. Women come up against this, and we have to stop asking questions like, well, why didn't she just leave? We know, again, there's records of this. We know there's research around this. We know the difficulties women come up against when trying to exit toxic relationships, abusive relationships, and how difficult society makes it. I mean, even the way we question her now should be a prime example of why it was so difficult for her to leave. And so, yes, every contemporary example this book gets into will hopefully give us the context that we need to stop being surprised by it.
Yep. Very timely. Anna, tell folks how they can follow you.
Yes, everything is just my name. So you can say at Malaika Tubbs on Instagram. My website's or just AnnaMalaikaTubbs.com. I tried to make it very simple this time.
Yeah, exactly. All right, y'all. Make sure that y'all follow Anna because you have a podcast coming out as well, right?
I
on the
want
book.
to. I should have a podcast.
Okay. Well, you've been doing content, so you've been doing videos. I thought it was a
I've
podcast.
been doing a lot of videos, yes.
Okay.
And I think that there has to be. I couldn't fit everything in this book because the countless examples, they're just endless. And so I'm really brainstorming what is it even beyond this book where I can connect with folks and we can get all of these other examples and contemporary moments. And so, yes, I've been trying to follow in your footsteps, been very inspired by you. I'm trying to be brave and do my little videos. But I do think it helps. It helps to break them down into those little clips.
It definitely does. It definitely does. And we're going to need it, sis, because it's, ooh, child. Ooh, we got some work to do. But this is part of the work. So, y'all, one more time, Erased: What American Patriarchy Has Hidden from Us. Y'all cop that book. And then I want y'all, once you copped it and you've read it, call in and tell me your thoughts on the book. I know I better be hearing some people saying that they figured out some stuff that they needed to know because they read this book.
We should come back and do a book club. We'll just
there we go. Exactly.
once everybody's read it. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Anna, so much for
Thank
being here with me. You're welcome to come back anytime.
thank you. I appreciate you so much.
All right, you have a good one.
You too.